beyond the obvious. And today I have Paso He's the debut author of the book You Should Not Have to Kill to Get Ahead, reimagining wealth, power, and belonging in America. No other than Mr. Christopher.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm fabulous, fabulous Mr. Chris. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I
Absolutely. So I'm Chris Rivers, and I just put out this book about a month ago. You shouldn't have to kill to get ahead, reimagining wealth, power, belonging in America. And I wrote it because I'm born and raised in a working class family in Connecticut, the sort of family and sort of area that has been getting left behind by policymakers for decades. And I ended up going from that family to enlisting in the army, and I went and fought in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I led soldiers in Afghanistan. And from that experience, I'm very proud of my military experience, but I don't think that should be the only path available to people who want to be able to go to college and better themselves without having to take on a bunch of student debt. And that led me on a journey to really study public policy and international relations at Georgetown. And then I went and did diplomatic work for the United States all throughout the continents of North and South America. And then from there, I got into corporate strategy consulting, and now I work in the nonprofit world while also being involved in politics. So I've gotten the sort of first-hand view behind the curtain that a lot of people are wondering, why are decisions made? How does this even happen? And I put out the book to tell people we could be doing a whole lot better than we are now, and how could we do that?
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Chris. So let's continue to talk about your book itself because last week we did already on book one review. So let's do part two. The phrase hardworking Americans feel stuck resonates with so many people right now. In your observation, what's the number one reason why some or someone can work tirelessly, do everything right, and still feel like they are not financial hamster wheel?
I really think when you peel all the layers back, it comes down to shareholder supremacy and policy decisions that most countries have made to really prioritize the benefits to stock owners and shareholders more than to the people who are working. And what does that actually result in? That results in an average American household working more hours than any point in American history while earning less per hour. But they're also producing 5 times as much per hour as they were in 1980. So you're working harder per hour, working more hours, and then getting less in money, all while corporate profits have been setting records every single year. And that's where I know there is a lot of wealth in the system, but it isn't being shared by the people who are fundamentally doing the work to create it. And so for each individual person, it may be hard to connect those dots. But what you do see happening is you see that you're working harder. You're seeing that whatever currency you're earning is not going as far as it once did, while the billionaire class are jetting around the world on their private jets, living it up and renting out entire cities to get married in and whatnot. It's kind of in everyone's face. And so at the end of the day, it's you can't hide it anymore like you used to 40 years ago. So all that to me really goes back to the policy decisions to take in America $50 trillion worth of wealth from the bottom 50% and give it to the top 1%. And that has impacts on people's everyday lives when they're trying to go do their grocery shopping, when they're getting sick and trying to pay for medical bills or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, Mr. Chris. When you look at the economic landscape today, inflation, wages, housing costs, what factors are within an individual's control and what factors are genuinely systemic? How do you help clients distinguish between the two so they don't internalize blame for things outside their control?
Yeah, so I really hope clients and audiences in general try to understand root causes and things that are in our direct control, generally speaking, are the nice to haves. The people spend money on the newest, latest generation of cell phone when you may not need it. The highest level of cell phone plan or internet plan when you may not need it, the newest car, the anything like that when you could get by with something less, that is certainly within our control. Things that are not in our control, overall wages being 30% less than what they should be, not in our direct control. Things like healthcare costs from my grandfather's generation to our generation having gone up multiples, not in our direct control. Things like housing costs having also gone up from 30, 40,000 to over 400,000 per a median house, not in our control. But most countries, to include the United States, the policy makers have to answer to voters at some point. And so while it's not in our direct individual control, it is in our direct sort of collective control as a group. And if we started voting more often for the change to be systemic, to actually change the system of what it prioritizes, then you can change this conversation from what's in our control, what's not in our control, to say, hey, part of our job of being working class people, and that's about 90 or so percent of the population, generally speaking, is to hold our policymakers accountable to have a more fair system. So we can't directly control it, but we can help contribute to moving in a better direction than what we have been. But that requires education. It requires work that is sustained over a long period of time. And so while it's not in our direct control, I don't want to give up the idea that it's in our indirect control if we all start working together on it.
So, Chris, you've been in practice for 24 years, working with individuals, high net worth clients, and businesses. How has the definition of feeling stuck evolved over a career? What did it look like in 2000 versus today?
Yeah. So for folks getting into careers 2000 versus today, one, the uncertainty today over AI and what that is going to do for the nature of work moving forward, very uncertain. In 2000, people generally knew, hey, if I wanted to be a web developer, a coder, a consultant, a whatever it is, fire worker, or sorry, firefighter, EMT, whatever the case is, you kind of knew what the next 20 years were going to look like. And it was going to adjust a little bit. The iPhone comes out in, I think, 2007, and we have smartphones all of a sudden, but like that didn't really dramatically change your work life. Now with AI, everything's changing. The uncertainty around politics now is now more uncertain than ever. I mean, what we're seeing in the news with the US Supreme Court overturning President Trump's tariffs and then him implementing other version of tariffs, and the actual impacts on entire industries was not something we would have considered 25 years ago, right? And so at the end of the day, I really think for those getting into the sort of prime of their career now, it's about flexibility, it's about adaptability. What you want to be doing for 20 or 30 years from now is likely not what you're doing today. And that is a generational shift. If we go to our parents' generation and ask them how they dealt with it, they're probably not going to have a good answer because they didn't have to deal with it. So at the end of the day, if you're feeling like, boy, the world seems to be changing all around me, you're right, but you're also not alone.
You're not alone, people. Everybody does. Affected with the word AI. Many people assume that feeling stuck is purely about income. That if they must made more money, the feeling will disappear. Based on your experience, what clients across different income brackets, is that true? What else is at play?
I really think the what else is at play is really important to focus in on here, because what else is at play is this idea that wealth, what does it even mean? How much wealth is enough wealth? And at the end of the day, if you're making more money than you actually need to feel comfortable in your style of living, you feel pretty wealthy. You can earn a lot less and live in a very rural area or in a country that doesn't offer a lot of services and feel pretty good. You can make a lot more and have to go to high cost cities and just barely be able to keep up, and you never really feel great about that. In addition to that, just a basic sort of wealth equation, it's the sort of generational wealth equation. So we think of wealth oftentimes as being something you can measure, like the amount of dollars or whatever currency you're operating in your bank account. But most of us also can compare ourselves to our grandparents and our parents, and most people want to be have the kids or the future generations be better off than they are. And in America right now, over half of people are worse off economically than their parents, and even more so than their grandparents. And that is a trend that is kind of breaking the American dream. And there's a real psychological impact to that. But it's generally not because people are working less hard or that they're not as well trained or that they're not as well equipped. It is really because we have created systems to take all of that wealth and put it into the hands of incredibly small amount of people. So, all that to say, the idea of wealth or how well you're doing is relative to whatever lifestyle you want to live. And my advice to people is whatever you start your career at, live that way for as long as you possibly can. Live in the smaller apartment, live in the smaller house, live with the older car for as long as you can. And as the raises come, put that money to good use in investments because we don't know what the future has. And if you kind of live that mentality, so for my wife and I, it was very much when we first joined as Army officers after we went to undergrad, we just kind of lived that style of life for decades afterwards and took all the extra money we got from our annual raises and put that money to good use. And if you kind of do that, if you do that approach, like you will be better off than probably 90% of people out there.
Let's talk about the debt, Mr. Chris. For the hardworking American who feels like they are drowning in payments, whether it's students' loans, credit cards, or medical debt, where should they look first for relief? What is the first step you recommend?
First step is actually understanding how much debt you actually have. There's a lot of people out there that don't realize just how much your monthly credit card bill is, and they don't realize how much their mortgage is and the car payment is, and a whole bunch of other elements. So, first step, audit yourself to just put a list together of how much debt you have and what interest rates are those debts. And then from there, organize it by interest rate and pay down the highest interest rate first, and then keep going down that list until it's all gone. If you get to the point where your interest rates you're paying are less than 5%, let's say, for a mortgage, then there's a real consideration of do you pay that down as fast as you can or do you pay that down minimally and invest. But until you get down to that sort of 5% or less range, audit it and rank order it from most interest to least and start working on that, whatever you have to do to start paying off that debt. I think you're muted, Daniel.
Thank you. You
Yeah.
work with the corporations and charitable organizations as well. From your perspective, what responsibility do employers have in helping employees feel less stuck, whether through benefits, retirement plans, or financial wellness programs?
I think what companies need to realize is it's actually in their long-term financial interest to take care of their employees. That used to be part of our economic system in the United States before the 1980s. Companies who have invested continuously in their employees in meaningful ways have seen returns on those investments. It may not be the easiest thing to explain at a shareholder meeting or when you're trying to get your quarterly bottom line statements to where they need to be, but for a long-term health of the company, you need to do that. The second thing I would say is COVID was such an interesting case study across different companies in the US. And some companies went sort of down the rabbit hole of what we would expect from large companies today, laying off a bunch of people or furloughing a bunch of people and waiting for the entire economy to turn back around and relying on government assistance to get those people through. There's other companies who typically smaller, medium-sized businesses who actually use that time to say, wow, we're all in this together and we need to hurt a little bit across the board so a couple people don't have to lose their jobs entirely. And then it spurred them to consider things like, hey, maybe stock-based compensation shouldn't just be for executives, but should actually be a structure for everyone in the company, thereby making everyone a partial owner of the company, inspiring them to work harder for it. And the companies who did that have been outperforming most of the other companies who haven't done that by leaps and bounds. But it's like America's best kept secrets. This is even being used today. And so if you're a company out there, what I always try to tell them is think of taking care of your employees, not just in the traditional what benefits you offer and what 401k or retirement account matching you can do. Think outside the box of what you've always done. And if a stock based compensation is good enough for your executives, why is it not good enough for everyone else? And there's a way to do it. You can figure it out. So take care of your employees, they'll take care of you.
Certainly, because they're the one giving you money. Yeah. So how do you counsel? Yes, how do you counsel someone who feels stuck because they are paralyzed by fear of making the wrong decision, whether about investing, buying a home, or changing careers? How do you help them build confidence in their choices, Mr. Chris?
I think there are two main things here. One is for people to understand that there's two basic ways to make decisions. One is the sort of completely irrational way that most of us who deal with data and math really prefer. What are all the requirements? Let's score them and let's have some number to figure out what you should do. Unfortunately, we know from research that that sort of purely logical approach is not as good when you're considering the biggest decisions you have to make. It is incredibly good when you're making easy decisions. So checkout line, trying to decide what snack you want to buy right as you go. Hey, what do you like? Prices, figure it out. Don't put any more thought into it. The sort of larger decisions, big investments like buying a house. I mean, we're talking the average house or the median house being over $400,000 in getting near that $500,000 mark. If you're thinking whether that's a good investment or not, certainly do some analysis. I'm not saying not to do it, but also don't be afraid to let your sort of gut reaction and the emotional side help guide you here. We all have incredibly complex brains and we learn from observing things throughout our entire lives. And that gut reaction can often tell us a whole lot more than what that rational reaction will. And when you can marry those two up, when you can marry the gut reaction to some logical analysis, that's how you make the best decisions you could possibly make. And then the thing that can wrap this all up together, because what I just described takes some time, takes some practice, and it sounds a little weird at first, but if you're surrounded by people you trust, your significant other that you may be buying the house with, your parents, their parents, ask for a few people's advice of what they went through. You're not the first one to be considering this, and getting other people's advice is really really helpful, but ask it in a way that's not so much tied to what you're considering. Ask them what their experience was, what they look for, what they would do differently, and that will tell you everything you need to know for the decision you have to make moving forward.
Very well said, Mr. Chris. You've been in the industry through the multiple market cycles from 2008 to 2020 and now. How do you help clients stay the course and avoid feeling stuck during economic uncertainty when the natural instinct is to freeze or panic?
So the two big things here, I keep coming back to two big things because I think it's so important to balance sort of individual side and the collective side. The individual side here is have your own theory of why you're investing what you're investing into. If you're trying to invest in political change and donating your time to different causes, if you're not moving in the right direction, you're having a setback, doesn't mean you stop or give up if the underlying cause is still there. Likewise, in investing, if the investment decision you made for yourself, for your community, whatever the case may be, if the underlying logic is still true, then when an economic downturn happens or tariffs happen or something outside of control and everything goes down 5% happens, if whatever the shock is didn't change the underlying logic, just stick with it because they typically bounce back, right? The market reacts in sort of mass psychological instances. Same thing with politics, same thing with a lot of this stuff. So that's the first thing I would say. Know why you're investing in what you're investing in, whether that's change or your money or whatnot, and then stick with it. The second part is be in a community of people who have also been through multiple versions of this. There is a time to sort of panic, sell, and get out if the facts have really changed for whatever you're doing. But that doesn't come across you know, every 10 years or so, 20 years maybe, like the when that's truly true. So at the end of the day, we could all use coaching. We can all use mentorship. The people who do the change and like managing what they have the best have amazing groups of mentors, or what we would call in my neck of the woods, the sort of kitchen cabinets that you can reach out to and actually talk to them. That's the thing that will really separate people who do their work really incredibly well and navigate those turbulent times well, and the people who don't.
So, Chris, to wrap up our discussion for today, if a listener takes away only one practice from this conversation, one small actionable step they can implement this week to start shifting the stock to momentum, what would they recommend based on your 24 years of experience helping people navigate their financial lives?
Yeah, so I would say my number one piece of advice is never stop learning. It's, most of us want to be in, you want to be a millionaire, you want to have see the world change, and that's all great. You usually can't get there from where you're at in one large step. So what you can do is be 1% better tomorrow than you are today. And if you never stop being 1% better tomorrow than you are today, then you will be world class in just a couple years, and just never give up in that mindset. That's what you can do starting right now.
Well said, Mr. Chris. So, can you please invite the listeners to support your latest book as well as your advocacy or whatever project that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so the way you can follow what I'm doing, you can see on the screen the book, You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead. It's available on Amazon, Apple Books, wherever books are sold online. You can find the links for that on my website, chrisrivers.com. You can also find there my YouTube channel, which is hopefully the beginning of a sort of academy to teach people how systems work and how to change the systems if they're not working for you, about our economy, about our political system, and about what it means to all belong together. So if you're interested in that, chrisrivers.com is how you stay up to date on everything I have going on.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Christopher Rivers. We use the views support Rivers for more and more empowering books like this to rise. So, Mr. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Modicon people, see you soon.